service. Now, you might not be used to seeing me in a hat, but here's the deal. It does not matter how much sunscreen I put on this shiny head of mine. No amount of sunscreen keeps me from getting sunburned on the top of my head. So I have to wear the hat. So I'm sorry if you're not used to seeing me in the hat, but we'll be sporting it today.
Don't worry, because I think if it gets sunny, watch.
Oh, I hope you're preaching those. Are you going to preach those?
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about doing the whole
Ray Charles
thing. Ray Charles.
Sunday.
I was more thinking Terminator. Terminator. And so, don't you worry about that.
I think more like cataract surgery, not Terminator. No, I'm just kidding. So we are thrilled to have you here. Let me mention a couple things to you before we get going. One of the things that we've got available to you today is on the Bible app that's put out by YouVersion. You can go to that app, click on the menu button that's at the bottom right-hand corner, and when that pops up, you'll see one of the options is events. You hit events and you're going to see Jeff City Church pop up there as an option. You're going to get a little map that shows you where we are. But if you click on that, then what you can pull up is our event on the Bible app. And so the lyrics for all of the songs that we have, they're going to be right there on the Bible app. I'm trying to look back and forth between YouTube and Facebook. But the things that you've got there, you're going to look right there in the middle. That'll kind of, maybe that'll work. Who knows? But the thing that we've got is we've got lyrics on there for you. Since we're going to be in lots of different places, we just thought we would set the lyrics up on the Bible app. And so I encourage you to check out the Bible app. You can get the lyrics to all the songs. There's also a place for you to be able to put in your own sermon notes. Speaking of sermon, Luke, do you want to give us a little preview of what we got coming up in here in just a few minutes?
Yeah, so we're going to continue our series of Me and My Big Mouth. We're real excited, and we've been hearing from James the last 2 weeks. A lot from James chapter 1, James chapter 3, giving us a lot of advice about how to use our mouth and the things that we should do. Today, we're kind of doing a shift a little bit, and we're going to introduce Paul's thoughts, the Apostle Paul, and his thoughts on these, how we use our words, and we're going to talk not just about the theory about, kind of advice, but today is about culture. Today is about creating, because I mentioned that we're going to talk about creating a culture of good communication. Today is really about how culture plays into that. And so this is really going to be a fun one because it's something, I guarantee you, most people have heard the verses that I'm talking about today. But just like all the things that we've been doing with James, it's easy to understand things we've heard, but to apply it to our lives,
When you talk about a culture, you're talking about like kind of how our words and the language that we use and the attitude that we use creates an atmosphere. Is that like it?
That is the end result.
Okay.
But believe it or not, the way that we use our words and the way that we have been brought up to use our words, that's a lot of culture. Like the culture that we were raised in, the culture that we are around and that we grew up in, that has taught us a lot about how to use our words. And so we need to be aware that culture, not just creating a culture, but how it sets us up this way. And so we've just kind of, and I'll give you a little preview. It's almost like when you're in premarital counseling and you're warning the husband and the bride, listen, you grew up in a family situation.
You've been influenced.
Aware of your culture and where you came from. And so this is what Paul is doing in one of his verses. So we're going to talk about that.
I one time heard somebody say, a fish doesn't know it's in water. It just has become so used to it. It doesn't realize it. And that's often how our communication style is. We've just become so used to it. It's ingrained in us, and we don't even know kind of how we come across sometimes to the people around us. So that's going to be
so it's going to be interesting. So you're right. It's a post thing that we're shooting for. But today is just making us aware that there's also a precursor to any situation that we come into, a cultural precursor. So there you go.
For those of you who don't know, we are live here on Facebook and on YouTube. Here in just a few minutes, when we switch over to begin our service, the main service is going to be on YouTube Live. And so if you're joining us on Facebook and you want to catch the service that starts up here at 9 a.m., then you're going to want to switch over to YouTube, to our channel, Jefferson City Christian. We'd love it if you subscribe to that, because then you'll get notifications whenever we put on new videos for student ministry Ministry or for Kids Way or anything that pops up there. So we'd love to have you subscribe to that. Folks are starting to roll in. We got tents popped up here in the service. We'll give you a little glance of that as we get ready to roll that way. I don't have, because I'm using my phone to do Facebook Live, I don't know what time it is. So what are we getting close to? About how many more minutes do we have before we need to get set up over there? Are we getting close to 9 o'clock? Maybe so.
About 5 minutes, about 7. Okay, about 8 minutes. Okay, so about 8 minutes, we're going to shut this thing down, but because we got to reposition a couple of things, and then at 9 o'clock, we are going to start our stream.
Sweet. So let me talk to you guys about a couple of things that we've had going on in the church. For those of you who have students in our student ministry, as you know, a few weeks ago, they started off with these Wacky Wednesdays,
right?
Where they were gathering together and they were going to have a larger event, which the youth was so excited about because it has been months since we've been able to get together, and they had these great things planned. Well then, as you know, the virus numbers have just really skyrocketed in our area. So they switched that up, and they've been doing some smaller group stuff.
Good.
Fun stuff. So, the high school boys came over, I believe.
We had high school boys at our house Wednesday night, and we played basketball. I played basketball.
I heard that you were playing basketball when Brooke went to pick up Jack. I thought, that's insane. That's a good way to get into it.
It was insane. It is
I was brushing off a sermon so that in case I had to do something, in case you twisted 2 ankles.
Right.
Good story. One time we were playing in the Morristown Rec League. And we had some guys from the church that went up there. Tim, who's our tech guy right here, he was part of some of those. I think he got kicked out of a few games. Because Tim is a very mild-mannered guy. He wouldn't harm a gnat.
Nothing safe in pre-show.
So anyway, we're up there playing in rec league, and this was like when we were in our upper 20s. And when you're at that age, we're kind of like 30. I think we're low 30s.
Yeah, low 30s. I'm low. Listen, by the time we started, I was in my 30s.
You don't realize that your body just can't do the things that it used to do.
Well, it should be at 30. I mean, most people at 30 probably should.
But at 30, like 18 is still within eyesight. You're like, I remember being able to touch the rim.
Right.
So anyway, so do you want to go on and tell the story? Because you know what I'm going to tell.
No. So I'm playing in a game, and I'm just playing in a rec league game, and I'm driving down, and all of a sudden, my right ankle gets twisted. I get twisted my right ankle, and so I'm not going to let this thing affect me. So I get my ankle twisted, and I go out, and I think, I'm going to keep playing, I'm going to keep going. So I get my ankle twisted, and then the next quarter or so, I decide to go back in with the bum ankle because I want to give my all to my team.
To the rec league.
Yes, to the rec league. That's how committed I am.
Yeah.
And then,
what happened?
I go back in, and my left ankle gets twisted probably
both ankles, one game, in one half.
And then at that point, I decide I'm calling it. This is stupid. And so now when I play, what's funny is it prompted me to go back and get like 2 ankle braces. So now when I play for like years after that, I look like 2 ankle braces.
You look like the Gronk, right? You're just all braced up everywhere, trying to play some rec league basketball.
That's right.
It may have been the very same season that we were out there playing basketball, acting way too young for our age, that I was running up and down the court in the third quarter of the game. Or they don't have quarters. And I pull up on the old hammy, okay? So I grab the hammy. I'm like, oh, we have no subs. We have, of course not. Because we're all working and we got kids, and so we tried to get 5 to show up. So we have no subs. I pull the hammy, and I just yell it out to the team, guys, I'm going to be worthless for the next 10 minutes. Literally 2 minutes later, Todd Mounts, who some of you may know, he grew up in the area, is now a great State Farm agent. Little props to Todd. Maybe he can sponsor our next live lobby. 2 minutes later, we're running down the court. Guess what Todd says? Oh! His hammy goes out. So no subs. All a bunch of over 30 on the court, 2 guys with bum hams.
Basically, if we played a team, the only thing they had to do was finish the game. Because we were probably not going to finish the game. If they wanted to win the game, they just had to stay on the court.
Just stay on the court. Because by 10 minutes left,
nature take
it will be 5-on-3. You know?
Exactly.
So that I'm sorry we went down a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but what we were doing right there is we were talking a little bit about Wacky Wednesdays. The student ministry has gone to great small group stuff on Wednesday nights. And so if you have a student, 6th to 12th grade, they're doing mini golf, they're doing basketball, they're getting together at people's house for a fire, sign them up. Email michael@jeffcitychurch.com and we will get them into a small group for Wacky Wednesdays. We're getting ready to throw it over to YouTube, so all you Facebook people, find us on YouTube, Jefferson City Christian, and we will begin our service. Good! Are you ready to sweat? I mean worship. Yes! Getting a little warm so far. Set up for you. I know right now we are waiting for just a second to get our YouTube connection up because we're going to stream this thing live here in just a couple of minutes. And that connection was giving us a little bit of trouble. So go ahead and continue to find your seats and maybe try to find you a spot in the stage. And when I know that the YouTube connection is up, I will go into some announcements. And I don't want to start before that because I don't want to leave them out. So Tim, you can give me, is that the thumbs up? We're good to go? Welcome to the YouTube people as well. Yeah, clap for the YouTube people. Hello guys, it's so good to see you all. I would switch you around, but I'm sure I would mess something up. And so I'm not going to do that. Let me do something. I think this is just kind of fun seeing everybody out here in the sunshine ready to do this thing. And so what I want to do is I want to get a video of you and I want you to be like out of your mind excited, okay? So like, it's like whatever your favorite, yell out to me, who's your favorite like musical artist, okay? Just somebody, come on. Casting Crowns and Crowder, okay, very good. Anybody brave enough to say something else? Okay, we got, okay, so pretend that you're getting ready to see that person, all right? Or pretend that I am that person, all right? And I'm going to say, welcome to Jefferson City Christian Church, and then I am going to pan, okay? And as I pan, I want you all going nuts, all right? Like it's the most awesome thing in the world. Don't stop, okay? You guys over here, I'm going to go like this. So after I have passed you, don't stop cheering until I get all the way to here, okay? So we don't want it to be like a reverse wave where it like dies as you go. You know what I'm saying? We just want to be happy, okay? Are you ready? Everybody ready? You get it? All you gotta do is cheer. There you go. Robert's up. He's ready to stand. Are you ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Welcome Jefferson City Christian Church. Yeah! Are you ready for some outdoor worship? Well done. You can stay standing. I'm just going to talk to you just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to sing together. Stand up and down. We'll do some calisthenics for you guys to go ahead, as if you're not already sweating in the sun. Let me just make mention of a couple of things before we get going. Let me say that communion and water bottles are available to you. Feel free to grab the water at any point during the service. Also, if you have to use the restroom, we ask that you go in this door right here, or you might be able to use this door as well if somebody's standing there. But if nobody's standing there, that door usually remains locked. So your surest bet is to go where it says enter here, and then you can find the restrooms that are right down to your left as you enter that. So your water and your restrooms will be available to you. If you want lyrics to the songs, there's a couple of different things you can do. You'll see the bags that we have hung on the tents. Each one of those bags, you can find it somewhere on your tent, has a little paper inside that has lyrics to the songs that we're going to be singing. So I'd encourage you to grab one of those. We are going to try to do some familiar ones, some golden oldies, so maybe some of you will find the lyrics very familiar. If you're kind of tech savvy, then we would encourage you to open up the Bible app. We have an event on the Bible app, so if you open up the YouVersion's The Bible app, and you go down to the menu and you click the menu, then you will see events on there. Hit events and you will see Jeff City Church as one of your options. A little map will pop up and a red pin where we are, where you're standing. As long as it has a place for you to take notes for the message. And so you can do that to get your lyrics and take your notes for today's message. We are absolutely thrilled that you are here. Thank you so much for coming out. We're looking forward to worship together. And I am going to pass it over to Stephanie to lead us in some songs.
All right, so for this first song, we're going to have you clapping, okay? So Bobby's going to help us get the rhythm, and we're going to clap, okay? There you go. Let's sing Marvelous Grace. Marvelous grace of a loving love, grace that exceeds our sin and our guilt. Yonder on Calvary's mount outpour, there where the blood of the
sports. Baseball was on strike. He was in the middle of a trial. And then the 1994 Olympics didn't go so well for a particular figure skater, okay? Then something happened in 1995, and it was all Michael Jordan. Does anybody remember the words that he faxed into the NBA, into news outlets? Does anybody remember? All he did is write, "I'm back." Those are the only two things he said on fax. And those two words exploded. I mean, if we would have had social media, it would have broken the internet. But we didn't at the time. So all of these news outlets just went nuts, and they started rushing down to Bulls Stadium. Afterwards, most people would say he saved sports at this time by just saying the words, "I'm back. I'm back." And it was amazing because what's crazy with sports. And in about 3 weeks, $1.3 billion entered the stock market. The stock market grew by $1.3 billion. They called it the Jordan effect. Okay? And so just the power of a fax in 2 words. And so this series is all about that. All about how your words, my words, our words have the power to change people's lives, can move us in directions that we never thought we would be in, can change not just our days, but our destiny. And so we started talking about this a couple of weeks ago. And if you weren't here a couple of weeks ago and have not been online, we have been teaching this motto right here, okay? So and if you're here, you know what I'm about to do, right? You know what we're about to do. So everybody get your hands up like this. This is what we learned in week 1. If we are quick to be aware, and it's an art. Listening is an art. It's not just one of the 5 senses. It's an art. It's a discipline that we have. People feel heard and people feel understood. And that's what we're shooting for when we're listening. And then he said, be slow to speak. People who are slow to speak, they don't produce something what James calls human anger. And human anger is something of when people speak out of emotion, out of passion. And that's not a bad thing unless you're speaking out of anger. And when you're speaking out of emotion and when you're speaking out of passion, you speak, quote, too soon. You, quote, put your foot in your mouth. And that's what happens. And so if you're one of these people that have that problem, man, I'm always just putting my foot in my mouth. I'm always just saying things I shouldn't say. I'm just always offending people. Then guess what? You might need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then the anger stops, because that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting to stop the anger, stop and anger in the Greek, with the way that he used it, it produces things like vengeance, like wrath, like punishment. That's what James is telling us. So that's what we learned in week 1. Week 2, he followed that up by saying, listen, this is the advice I gave you, but listen, you need to understand the power of your words. We need to understand that our words have so much power. The words spoken to us, the words spoken over us, the words spoken about us, they have power. And so what James did in this second week is he reminding us about the power of our words. And he said, listen, your words, it's like a bit in the horse's mouth. It's like a bit. And such a small person can move and maneuver such a large animal and take it wherever they want to go. And it's all because of this bit in the mouth. He said it's like a rudder on a ship. I mean, the wind takes the ship and powers the ship, but this small rudder and a driver, it just kind of maneuvers this ship wherever it goes. And that is the power of your mouth, your tongue. And he followed that up by saying, listen, your mouth, your words, it's like a wildfire. It's like a wildfire. And it started by just a small spark. But this small spark can be so dangerous. And we all know this, right? Because we've experienced a wildfire just recently in Gatlinburg. We've seen the destruction of a wildfire that was started by such a small spark. People lost their jobs. People's lives were changed. And it all started by somebody else and their carelessness, possibly. And so James reminds us that our words are powerful. And it's such a small part of our body. You know, there's statistics that they've done about the power of negative words. They say for every, get this, for every one negative word or every one negative experience, you need 5 positive things or 5 positive words to overcome that one negative. Did you know that? There's statistics that have been done that say, you know what, Dad, if you're a dad in here, if you're a dad, did you know that statistically your words matter or have more weight than moms? I don't know what it is. They just say, dads, you need to be very careful how you approach your children, how you approach the people in your life. Because dads, your words carry more weight than even the moms. That's just statistics. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but dads, be careful about how you treat your daughter. -1. They said for every divorce, they did statistics and said, you know, they were criticizing each other or encouraging one another. They said there were 4 more times a week that they criticized versus 3 times they were encouraging. So there was a -1 effect when it came to ratios. And that was the root of a lot of the problems they were having. And I just started thinking about that idea, about divorce and about the power of that. Because when we decide that we no longer want to be with somebody, we don't just divorce their mouth, do we? We divorce all of them. And it doesn't just affect just them, it affects everybody around them. And so we have to be aware that our words can spread like a wildfire. And so James reminded us, and so today we're going to take a turn. We're going to hear from a guy named Paul. Now, Paul is an interesting story and one that I think is very interesting and really would lead you to believe, you know what, maybe Jesus had a powerful story. Maybe there's something about, if you're really doubting whether Jesus is real or whether Jesus had raised from the dead, if you're kind of doubting that, you need to look into the story of Paul. Because Paul, when we meet him in the scriptures, he is anti-Jesus, anti-church, anti-Christians. His whole purpose is to arrest Christians. And then something happened in his life to change his mind. Something major happened, and it's recorded in the book of Acts what happened in the life of Paul. But this guy who was totally against Christianity, totally against the Christians and their God, who, by the way, believed in the same God, didn't believe that Jesus was God, totally changed his opinion and became one of the greatest evangelists that we've ever known, starting churches everywhere. That's what he's later known as, this evangelist, this church starter. And today, we're going to read from a letter that he wrote to a church in Ephesus, the church of Ephesians. And what's interesting about this particular letter is this letter comes to one of the largest Roman providences that there are. The 4th largest Roman providence. 500,000 people in Ephesus. It was a port city. A lot of diversity in this area. And so when Paul comes into Ephesus, he comes in and he starts to preach the message, and churches are started all over Ephesus. But what's interesting, because of the diversity in this area, you get both Jewish converts, people who are Jews, and also what they call Gentile converts, people who are non-Jewish. And so if you're not Jewish today, you're a Gentile, okay? And if you don't know anything much about what was happening about that time, is the Jewish people were having a hard time accepting the Gentiles because they didn't have history. And the Gentiles were having a hard time with the Jews because they weren't being accepted. So there was a lot of diversity in the church at that time when it came to the history of those people. And this is interesting for us here today because in our mission statement at this church, we say that we want to be a church, quote, for all kinds of people. We want to lead all kinds of people to a committed relationship with Jesus Christ and his church. That's our mission. And so our ears need to perk up today because we need to understand that when you're dealing with all kinds of people, all different kinds of people, just like they were in Ephesus, you're going to get different backgrounds. You're going to get different belief systems. You're going to get different understandings. And so you're going to have to navigate that, especially in the church. And this is what it was in Ephesus. So I'm going to read some of the letter from Ephesus, and I want you to listen to what Paul's saying here. Ephesus, no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They're darkened in their understanding and separate from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. Now, I want you to think about that second. If you were a Gentile and how you would take that. And there's been a lot of interpretation of why he wrote it this way. And what I want you to know is, it sounds like he's being really harsh to the Gentiles, doesn't it? It sounds like he's being really rude to the Gentiles. And if you're a Gentile and you're sitting in church, you're going, hey, dude, what's up? What he is doing here is he is not bashing on the Gentiles. He is reminding them of their past and what they grew up in. See, they grew up in Rome, in the Greek world that they lived in. And in the Greek world they lived in, they had many gods, many different gods. And all of those gods were self-consumed. The gods that they believed in, the gods that they served, they were self-consumed. They did what they wanted to do. If they wanted to manipulate another person, they would just do it. And they didn't do it for the benefit of that person. They did it for the benefit of their own power. They were greedy. And so in the world, when you believe in these kind of gods, and you're always serving these gods, you're always pleading with these gods to help you. And so you don't get their favor by anything but giving them money, giving them sacrifices, giving them things. And it's like, if I give them enough, they might bless me. They might bless my crops. They might bless my land. They might bless my finances. They might bless my wealth. So their whole idea in gods and humans was they were all about pleasing their God. And so it created a society that was not very good. It was a winner-take-all society. It was anything goes society. In their society, this term that might makes right is a good thing. So if you were more powerful, if you were bigger, if you were stronger, if you could beat someone up, then you were better. And that was normal. That was just the way of life. Bigger beats stronger. Richer beats poorer. And so if you were in a situation where you were poor and someone else was rich and you were supposed to serve them, if you were their slave, if you were there for them, given to them, guess what? It didn't matter. It didn't matter. And if you were a woman sitting in this room, if you were a child or a woman, your life was not worth what a man's was. You were basically in negotiations a pawn. If someone was selling a deal or if someone was trading land, they would include the women and the children. They would kind of include their younger daughter as part of the deal. That was just how women were treated. They were pawns in situations. So they didn't have a lot of value. Children, they didn't have a lot of value. Men did, specifically rich men. And so that is the society they went into. And so it was an anything goes society. And so it just goes to remind us, and what Paul is reminding them is, listen, Gentiles, remember, you are a product of the culture that you grew up in. And you have to remember that. You have to remember that. And you know what? All of us here understand that, right? There are some of you that come down south and you're like, dude, why do they put salt on everything? Right? It's like, what is this fatback they keep talking about? Because they seem to put fatback in everything, right? They salt everything, they fatback everything, they season everything. What is this sweet tea they speak of? It's like they put sugar in their tea, and then you go up north and you're like, I'd like some tea. And they give you the tea, and you drink it, and you're like, what's up with this? This is tea. I want sweet tea. And so they say, oh, okay, sure, let me have you some sweet tea. And they give you Splenda. And you're like, no, you don't understand. I want sweet tea. It's got to be in there. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I grew up. That's the way I know these things. This is the way we do it down south, right? That's what we realize. We think about what we eat, how we are raised, how the things that we are used to growing up. And then we go somewhere else and we visit somewhere and we're like, wow, their culture is not like our culture. And it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with how you grew up and how you understand the world. And listen,
I'm a pastor, so I do premarital counseling. Do you know what premarital counseling is all about? It's helping those people who are about to go on their honeymoon. Remember something. After your honeymoon, you're going to have to live together. Right? After your honeymoon, things start to change, right? And after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10, you have to remember that how you grew up, it's going to start to creep its ugly head. And some of you probably, if I were to poll you and ask you stories, probably about year 2, 3, 5, you started learning things about your spouse. You're like, what? You believe what? This is how you view what being a wife is? This is how you view what a dad is, what a husband is? This is how you discipline? This is how I discipline? And so I'm going through premarital counseling, and I'm asking questions like, well, what did your mom and dad believe? What did your dad tell you? What did your mom and dad? And I'm trying to do this, and they're looking at me like I have 3 heads. And you know what? I always tell people, they don't care. They don't care what I'm saying right there. And I love everybody that if I've ever done your premarital counseling, I understand that. I don't take offense at that you probably look at me like, thank you for my premarital counseling, but I'm thinking right now about the beach. Thinking about my wedding day, thinking about invitations, thinking about the food, and I'm thinking about all those things that I need to think about to get ready for my wedding. But I'm trying to say, listen, that's great, but you got to be married. And falling in love, it takes a pulse. Staying in love, it takes more than that. And so we're trying to prepare for that. And I always tell people at the very beginning, listen, it would be great if we could meet like a year later and do this. Because a lot of this would make so much more sense after you have all of these stories. It's like post-marital counseling. That's what we need in our world. And a lot of people have that. It's called counselors. It's called counselors. That's why we go to counselors. That's post-marital counseling. When it all kind of goes crazy. And so what I want to do for you for a second is I'm going to read this next part. And if you're someone who says, I haven't bought into this Christianity thing, I'm not sure, what Paul is about to do is he's speaking to a church. He's speaking to baptized believers. This is like post-marital counseling for him. This is people who have decided to follow the way. And they have already made a commitment. They're already going to church. And now he's trying to say, listen, Gentiles, you got a past that you're going to have to recognize. And then he's speaking to both the Jews and the Gentiles here about the change that is supposed to take place when you walk down the aisle and you make a commitment to someone and say vows. I just said that in a marriage term. But when you become a Christian and you commit your life to Jesus, that's exactly what the Bible talks about our life with Christ-like. He compares it to a marriage. So we need to understand that. So if you're a believer here today, I need your ears to perk up because this is what he's saying to us, the church. After he talks to the Gentiles, he says, and the Jews, you, however, he says, it's not that way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in a true righteousness and holiness. And there's that word that we talked about in week 1, righteousness. You were taught righteousness. You were taught justice, right? Those are the words that come to mind when you think of righteousness. Justice means that we are all equal. Justice means that we strive for the betterment of everybody, that no one comes in and they're less than. We create a culture of peace. We come together in love. Our end game is unity. That's who we are. That's what we represent. The righteousness of God. And you've grown up in a world where everyone is created equal. And we grew up, we kind of in our Western culture, we grew up where everyone has the right. Everyone's created equal. All men are created equal. Where women should have the right to live just as men do. Equal pay. Equal in the way that they are treated at home and at work. They shouldn't be harassed. They shouldn't be taken advantage of. We look at our children and we think we need to protect our children. We need to protect our children in all situations, at home, and when they have been left, we try to protect them if they've been abandoned. We create systems within that, and we care about our children and our women. We don't think it's right for slavery to happen. We think about all of these things, and we think about the world that you grew up in Western culture in America. Believe it or not, these things that we just assume as Americans, that wasn't so in Rome. That wasn't so in the time of Ephesus. The church it was fighting for that. It was fighting for this culture where everyone is loved. Everyone is equal. Everyone matters. No one should be taken advantage of. They were fighting for those things way back then. Way back then. And we just assume those things today. We just assume it's right. It wasn't always right. And it wasn't always normal. And so we have to understand where we're coming from, but also where Jesus is trying to take us in the world that we live in today. And so here's the reason I'm bringing this up today while we talk about our words, is because one of the things Paul talks about is the power of our words. He talks about how we use our words. Here's what Paul says. He says, listen, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. That's Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Now, the word unwholesome talk is a very interesting word. It's this word that literally means do not let any bad fish smell come out of your mouth. It's like this, it's a Greek word that has like a bad fish smell or a rotten fruit. When fruit rotten and it's getting moldy, you know? Have you ever had that happen? Like when I was a young boy in Byrdstown, Tennessee, because I had never had communion. And I thought, I want to sneak over there. I'm going to give me some communion because I want to see what that tastes like. And so I waited a couple of days. I didn't want to do it. I was smart, okay? So I waited maybe 2 or 3 days, and I thought I'll let everything die down. And so my dad worked at the church, and he was dumb enough to leave the front door open. So I snuck over where our parsonage was right next to the church. Easy peasy. Mom, I got to go out and play. Not. And so I went out to play, snuck over to the church, unlocked the door, snuck down the aisle, and sure enough, the golden goose was right there on the communion, still out. I thought, great, this is awesome. They just left it out. How stupid of them. And so I got the juice. It was dark. I didn't want to turn on the lights, so it was dark. So I got the juice, and I got the bread, and I ate the bread. Oh, that's good. I see what they're talking about. And then I drank the juice. Now, what you need to understand about juice, when it's warm, after days, it gets moldy. And there had been about an inch worth, maybe an inch, I don't know, of mold that had been on the top of that communion. And I didn't care. I didn't see it. And I went and just downed the mold. And the taste of it just hit me. I was like, what is this? What are they thinking? And then I realized there's mold on the top of this juice. It had gone bad. But when Paul says, don't be a moldy mouth, don't be a fish mouth, that's what he means. You need to watch what's coming out of your mouth because it's gross. It's bad. It isn't good. And people, they don't need to hear it. He says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. And then he goes on to say, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Now, when you talk about this, because has anybody, who's used this on your kids before? We use this on our kids all the time, but this is like a verse we put up in our house all the time. Does anybody else, have you ever used this with your kids? Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Let's encourage one another, right? We say this, but I want to help you understand the heart behind this verse about why he did this. Because what we get the impression is that we're always supposed to be like encouraging to one another and, oh boy, everybody. And that is not exactly what he said there. He actually said, let me read it again, what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. That's the part that I want you to listen to. What is helpful for them according to their needs. Like, when my kids were babies and they were doing something they shouldn't do, like throwing food at the table, I go, now stop doing that. I was trying to teach them, let's not do that. Let's not throw food at the table. Don't push your brother. Don't push your sister. Now don't do that. Let's not run in the hall. Let's not do that. And I was sweet and I was kind and my voice was a certain way because I was taught not to do those things, right? So we were using these voices. But then they grow up and they get attitudes, right? And so now when I correct my kids, I don't do it like this. I do it firmly and with intention. So when my child does something that they shouldn't do, I look them in the eye and say, you should not do that. Okay? And I'm firm. And I'm intentional. My son's driving right now. Okay? God help us all. With people, not just my son, but anybody who has someone that 15, 16 year. And he's good. I'll give him credit. I'll just say it right now. He's doing well. He's doing really well. But when you sit in the car with somebody and they're driving, you don't say, now don't stop in the middle of the road. Don't go to the side. There's a car coming. No. Do you? Stop. You know? Don't do that. You are forceful. You are firm because why? There are lives that matter in this car. You are carrying precious cargo, including me. Right? And so you're talking a little bit more firm. Now, I want you to think about as an adult, if this is the way we approach our employees for a performance review. You need to come to work. I know that you're getting off early and you're not putting your time in. You just need to keep doing that. I know that you're not performing well, but come on. And we talk like this. Do we do that? What kind of performance review would that happen? How are we going to interact in a work situation if that's the way we interact with each other and we're trying to help them? You know? What happens if you're confronting somebody and you're having to tell them something difficult? You don't speak to them like that. You do what is helpful for them. And then he said, according to their needs. Not everybody needs an oh boy, do they? You've been there. Not everybody doesn't need an oh boy sometimes. Sometimes they need a you better, you need to, hey, this is not good. Sometimes that's what they need. And again, you're not doing it because you don't like them. You're actually doing it because you think it's going to help. And so we need to remember that encouragement and the words that we use to speak to people is helpful, but it's also according to what they need. And so I want to end this by just giving you some advice from what Paul is saying to us. He says, listen, well, let me just give you, first of all, something that I wrote down, and then I'll read some Paul. If your words aren't for the betterment of the person, if your words aren't meant for the betterment of the person you're speaking to, you might need to take James' advice and be slow to speak. If you're not walking into a situation and it is not with the intent to make the hearer better, if you don't have their interests in mind, you might need to be slow to speak. And this is what Paul would say in Ephesians 4. He would say, get rid of all your bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. That's what Paul tells us. You need to get rid of bitterness and anger and rage and malice. In other words, he wants you to ask a question. What is the intent of this conversation? Why am I here? Think about that when you're going into a difficult conversation, when you're having to confront somebody, when you're having to correct somebody, when you're trying to make somebody better. What is the intent of this conversation? Why am I having it? And the second thing, are my emotions playing way too big of a deal? Am I coming in anger, in bitterness, in rage? Is it going to create an atmosphere of bad things that happen? And if your intent is good, and if your emotions are down, he goes on to say, be kind. In Ephesians 4:32, be kind, and be compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as God forgave you. That's what he says. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ forgave you. In other words, this word compassionate, this word compassion, it is not hurting for somebody. It is hurting with somebody. There's a difference. If you're just, I'm hurting for you, but no, I'm hurting with you. I'm really trying to understand you. I'm flipping it around and I'm trying to see this from your point of view. You're really going to understand where somebody's coming from, their culture, their history, their attitude, why they're doing what they're doing. You might not need to be slow to speak. You might need to be quick to listen to them. You might need to ask more questions. You might need to hear them and understand them. So you know what? I'm just going to listen to what you're saying. I'm going to try to hear you. Before I go into what I'm about to say, I'm going to try to be compassionate. Now, if someone's ever had to confront you and you've ever had to be confronted, we all know it doesn't feel good. We all know it's not a happy time sometimes when somebody says something that's difficult for us to hear. If someone's correcting us, if someone's saying something that we don't like. Now, before we get angry and we shut someone out, I want to remind you of something that I think he was speaking to the Gentiles here. Don't ignore someone just because you don't like what they're saying. Do not shut people out just because you don't like it. He had to say that to the Gentiles. He had to share that. Listen, your history sets you up for some problems in the church, and you need to understand that. And there were times when they had to make contingencies for the history of the Gentiles because of the culture they grew up in. Especially as it related to something he talked about, sexuality and the things that they dealt with. And the way, and the dietary restrictions and things like that. They had to work through all that in the church. The ones that they didn't need to worry about, and then there's some ones that they had to say, you know what? We need to figure this out if we're going to coexist with each other. And the Gentiles had to listen to that and say, you know what? You're not telling me this because you hate me, because you don't love me, because you don't care about me, because you don't want me. You're actually telling me this so that we can be brought together in unity. And sometimes if you are being confronted, if they're coming in love, if they're coming because they want to make you better, because they want to do better things for you, you need to listen. You need to perk your ears up and listen to what they're saying before you get emotional and ignore them. This last part, and we're going to get ready for communion. So if you guys would like to kind of start opening your communion right now. Something he said there, he said, forgive each other just as Christ forgave you. You know, every week at the church, we take communion when we're here together. It is a reminder for anyone taking that communion that there was once a time when we were at odds with God. That our life did not reflect what God wants. And it is a reminder that Jesus went to all extent to come down and to offer us a way back to Him. And if you've been forgiven by Jesus, if you're a believer and you've been forgiven in such a way, who are we to not forgive someone else? Who are we to hold their sins against them? Who are we to say, you know, I'm writing you off? Because we were not written off. Jesus did not write us off. He gave us a way back. And I know we try to play that, well, you don't understand what I know. You don't understand. I don't understand. But Jesus understands. God understands. He knows all things. And again, if He forgave you, if you remember the words of Jesus, forgive them for they know not what they do, then we can take this communion in good conscience, knowing that we need to have the attitude of Jesus. So that's what I want you to think about as we go through communion. We're just going to play some music, and then Stephanie's going to close us out before our closing announcements. But as we go through this time, I just want you to reflect on the forgiveness of God, on the fact that He loves us, that He cares about us, that He will do anything to bring us back together. and how we need to reflect that in our own lives. It's in your Son's name. Let's pray. Father, we thank you. We thank you for forgiveness. We thank you for going to the extent that you did, Father. And as we go through this time of communion, Father, let us remember your forgiveness. Remember your grace. Let us reflect on the way that we treat others, the way that we speak to others, the way that we correct others. Father, give us the strength to remember and to act accordingly. It's in your Son's name. Amen.
Hello, everyone. It's with heavy hearts that Stephanie and I today would like to inform the church that we, at the end of August, will officially be stepping down from ministry. For the past year, we've struggled with a restlessness in our spirit that we have been felt called to be somewhere else, doing a different type of work. For a long time, we fought that restlessness because we thought that it was just something selfish in our hearts, that we desired something new and something different. But after talking to the people that we love the most and those closest to us, we realized that it was time for a new season. We wanted to let all of you know, parents of the youth, you got letters. The rest of the church will receive letters later. We want you to know how much we love this place. We truly do. It was here that Stephanie and I actually met. It was here that we got married, and it's been here that you've let me love and invest in your youth for, almost 10 years now. We're so grateful for all the opportunities that we've had here. I know that for some of the youth out there, this might sting a little bit, and that was never my intention. But if there's anything you need to say to us, any questions that you have, anything that we need to talk about, Steph and I are going to remain here after the service, and we are available to you. Thank you guys so much for all the many blessings that you've given us over these past 10 years.
It's been such an incredible journey and honor to worship with you and to have the privilege of growing up in this worship ministry. And so I know this is going to be a big transition for all of us, but we're trusting and believing that God is faithful. And Robert's going to give you all a little bit of insight from behalf of the elders and the rest of the staff as well.
My name is Robert. I'm one of the elders here. And this is obviously a bittersweet occasion for us. We recognize the tremendous loss and the big shoes that we have to fill with this change, but we're excited about the Valentine's future and their willingness to follow this calling. We've benefited much from their talents. If you have a young person at this church, they have almost certainly been influenced by Michael's devotion, care, and guidance. Week to week, we've been blessed to see Stephanie use her musical gifts even before she led our worship. And she's still recruiting weekly at the coffee shop for our church, so we're really going to miss that. In many ways, we've had the pleasure of watching them both grow up. Stephanie's been part of the church family for longer than most of the elders. We've seen Michael blossom before our very eyes here. So on behalf of the elders, I want, as much as more than saying goodbye, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your love, your gifts, your faith, and your lives with us. So, much of your legacy will stay with us, and our prayer is that our legacy goes with you. Thank you.
Just to let you know from a staffing standpoint of what we're doing moving forward, we want you to know that we've been made aware of this, and so we have already taken steps to gather the youth team together to start searching and be sure that this transition happens as flawless as we can make it. So we are working to make this as smooth as possible for you guys. So know that your staff, I'm personally leading the search committee for the youth pastor, and I know that we're putting together a worship ministers search committee as well. So just to let you know, this will hopefully, we value these guys. You know, this, like you said, it's hard to fill shoes, and so, but we're going to try, and we're going to try to do the best we can for our church as we move through this difficult time. So want to also express love to you guys. I've known you guys for quite a while, and they were in my youth group. So yeah, so just love you guys, care about you guys, and pray for you guys moving forward. So Stephanie will close this out.
I just want to remind you that even though a lot of you are hearing this news for the first time today, we still have through the end of August. So lots of love to give, lots of worship to have together. And we're, again, just trusting, believing. God has always been faithful. He will continue to be faithful, and he'll bring even bigger shoes in this next phase. So if you would, stand with me. I want to pray our blessing over you. I'm just so thankful to each of you for coming out today and enduring the sun and the breeze that I thought was for sure going to blow away some of these tents and just worshiping with us. This has been such a wonderful, wonderful morning together. Let me pray over you as we go. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and bring you peace. In the name of Jesus, amen.